Imagine a military patrol sent into one of the most inaccessible mountainous areas of Afghanistan. A previous team has disappeared. The tracks lead to a cave. There is military equipment on the ground, and vague remains are visible around the entrance. And then out of the darkness, something emerges that, according to one alleged witness, looks like no human he's ever seen before. A huge humanoid figure, reddish-haired, unnatural height, and a weapon resembling a long spear. This is the story that years later would become known as the Kandahar Giant. But here begins the real mystery. The story has no photographs, no publicly available body, no official military report to confirm what happened. The witnesses remain anonymous, and the different versions of the story contradict each other on some of the most important details. Yet the case refuses to go away. Even stranger, the Kandahar Giant is not the only story from Afghanistan. Over the years, other servicemen have also claimed to have seen unusually tall human figures in remote valleys and mountainous areas. What lies behind these stories? War legends born of the tension and isolation of war. Misidentified people and animals. Stories that have gradually grown through repeated retellings. Or is there a real incident hidden somewhere behind the contradictions that has been transformed into a legend over time? If there were a population of people 3 or 4 meters tall today, is it possible that they could actually remain hidden in a world of satellites, drones, and cameras? Let's take a closer look at history and separate what is claimed from what can actually be proven. Stories of giants are much older than the modern accounts of Kandahar. Unusually large humanoid creatures appear in various religious texts, mythologies, and folk traditions. The Bible mentions the Nephilim. Ancient Greek myths tell of titans and giants. The Jotuns are present in Scandinavian legends, and stories about unusually tall creatures can also be found in the traditions of various peoples outside Europe. However, this does not mean that all of these legends describe the same real population. For historians and folklorists, the giant often has a symbolic function. He can represent chaos, natural forces, the unknown, or an opponent who seems physically insurmountable. But in the 21st century, a similar story appears in a place where one would hardly expect an ancient legend to come to life. Afghanistan. After the start of hostilities in 2001, international military units entered areas that until then were almost unknown to most people outside the country. These are vast mountain ranges, remote valleys, cave systems, and settlements, separated by miles of inaccessible terrain. It was there, according to later history, that an unusual incident occurred in the year 2002. A military patrol was said to have disappeared during an operation. When contact with it could not be re-established, a second team was sent to find the people and determine what had happened. Here, however, we must make the first important distinction. There is no publicly available official document confirming that U.S. military personnel were actually sent to search for a missing team and subsequently encountered a giant humanoid creature. The events that followed come from eyewitness accounts that emerged outside official military channels. In one early version, the team reaches a remote village where locals warn them not to continue to certain caves in the mountains. According to this version, a huge creature lived there, which the people feared and revered. But the military had another reason to be interested in the caves. Such places could be used to hide armed groups. The team continued. When he reached the area, according to the story, a huge humanoid figure emerged from one of the caves. Different versions give different heights. In some, it is approximately 3 meters, in others over 3.5 meters, and in later accounts it reaches almost 4.5 meters. Here we see a problem that will always arise in this case. As the story spreads, the details change. In one version, the creature throws stones. In another, it emerges from the cave armed with a long spear or pike. Later descriptions add reddish hair and beard, unusually pale skin, and more fingers than normal for a human. According to the stories, the clash ended with the death of the huge figure. Then the second part of the legend begins. The body was so large that it had to be airlifted. According to one version, a heavy transport helicopter was used for the purpose. The remains were then taken to a military base, and from there sent out of Afghanistan. And it was the alleged transportation of the body that became the basis of one of the earliest witness accounts associated with the case. A man posing as a U.S. Air Force serviceman claims that during a cargo operation, he saw a huge body on a pallet. He said the dimensions were so unusual that his first reaction was to describe it as a giant. He described pale skin, huge limbs, and unusually large feet. In some retellings, the claim of 6 fingers on the hand also appears. There is also a description of a strong, unpleasant odor, which the witness associated both with decomposition and with the peculiarities of the body itself. But again, we come to the main problem. There is no publicly available photo of this cargo. There is no independently verified name of the alleged witness. There is no available document for the transportation of such a body. Therefore, his account can be considered as a witness statement, but not as evidence. And this is where the case gets even more interesting. Years after the first accounts, a second alleged witness, known only as Mr. K, appears. He claims not only to have seen the body, he claims to have been there when the giant was killed. His version turns the mysterious story into an almost unbelievable account of a direct encounter between a military team and a huge humanoid creature. But it also creates a serious problem, because the more details Mr. K tells, the more it becomes clear that his story does not completely match the earlier version. There is no warning from a nearby village in his account. He claims there were no settlements around at all. The team followed the route of the missing soldiers and reached a mountain trail. After some movement along it, he discovered the entrance to a cave. According to the testimony, there were bones and pieces of American military equipment around it. And then something emerged from the darkness. Mr. K describes a figure at least several meters tall, with long reddish-brown hair and a beard. But what followed, he says, would become the most famous and controversial part of the entire legend. It is here that the story of the giant of Kandahar shifts from an unusual military account to a narrative that sounds almost like a scene from ancient myth, transposed into modern warfare. In the later version of the story, a new detail appears that was not present in the first stories. According to the anonymous witness known as Mr. K, the giant didn't just attack the soldiers. He carried a huge spear, and during the gunfight, he mortally wounded one of the team members. It is this moment that turns the story into one of the most discussed war legends of recent decades. But here a serious problem arises. This dramatic episode is not present in the original stories that appeared years earlier. There is no soldier named Dan in the early accounts. There is no mention of a giant spear. There is no description of such a duel. All these details appear only much later. This is what makes many researchers wonder if the story has gradually begun to change with each subsequent retelling. Over time, the size of the alleged giant also began to grow. Initially, there was talk of a creature with a height of about 3 meters. Later, almost 4.5 meters are mentioned. As public interest grows, more details are added to the story. For those who research such stories, this is a serious warning sign. When a story is constantly changing, it becomes very difficult to determine which part, if any, is based on a real event. And then comes the official reaction. After the story began to gain popularity, journalists sent an inquiry to the United States Department of Defense. The answer was brief. The department stated that it had no information or records of a Special Forces soldier killed by a giant in Kandahar. At first glance, this seems like a flat-out denial. But some researchers are paying attention to one detail. The original version of the story doesn't actually claim that a member of the Special Forces was killed by a giant. This detail appears much later. This raises a question for critics of the official response. Was the institution responding to the later version of the legend rather than the original claims? There is no definitive answer to this question, but whether this is a coincidence or not, the case becomes even more complicated. And just when many already consider the story to be definitively disproven, other evidence begins to emerge, not of the Kandahar giant, but of other unusually tall figures seen in various parts of Afghanistan. An Australian soldier describes how, while conducting a thermal imaging camera survey, his team spotted an unusual figure at a great distance. At first, everyone assumes they are observing an ordinary person. However, after more precise measurements, it turns out that the object is much further away than they thought. Calculations show that if this is indeed a human, its height would be approximately 3.5 meters. Of course, such estimates made through a thermal imaging camera at a great distance can be influenced by many factors: distance, atmospheric conditions, image distortion, errors in judging scale, but the testimony remains recorded. Later, another story emerged. An American soldier claimed to have observed a group of people around a fire. Everything seemed normal, until one of the figures stood up. Then, according to him, it became clear that the alleged person was much taller than the others. According to the witness, the huge figure had to bend down to enter a low building. Again, there are no photographs. There are no official reports. All that remains is the witness account. A similar story comes from another American patrol. During a nighttime surveillance using a thermal imaging system, the soldiers detected a large heat signature. At first, they assumed it was a group of people. After a few seconds, however, the thermal images merged into a single figure. They said it was about as tall as the trees around it. Did they really observe a giant? Or did the peculiarities of the thermal imaging technique create a misleading image? Without the original recordings, this question remains without a definitive answer. It is here that we must make an important distinction. There are witness statements, but there is no verifiable evidence. This does not automatically mean that the witnesses are lying, but it does not mean that their stories are proven. The story of the Kandahar giant falls squarely between these two extremes. On one side are those who believe it is one of the best kept military secrets. On the other are skeptics who consider the case a modern legend that has been embellished over the years. Perhaps the truth is much more prosaic. In wartime, people work under enormous pressure, isolation, constant danger, lack of sleep, and difficult mountainous terrain can affect perceptions. A story that began with an unusual incident can easily become a legend when told over and over again. But there is another question. Why do so many different servicemen who served in Afghanistan, independently of each other, describe encounters with unusually tall human figures? Whether all these stories stem from a common legend or there is something behind them that we still don't fully understand remains unknown. The Kandahar giant remains one of the most controversial stories in the world of paranormal investigations. To this day, there is no publicly presented physical evidence to confirm the existence of such a creature. There are no officially published documents. There is no independent expertise. But there is something that cannot be ignored. The story has survived for more than 2 decades. New evidence emerges. New interpretations emerge, and the questions remain. Is this a modern myth born in the harsh mountains of Afghanistan? A series of misunderstood observations? Or is there a real event hidden somewhere behind all the contradictions that will never be fully revealed? We may never know the final answer. But the story of the Kandahar giant reminds us how thin the line sometimes is between legend, eyewitness accounts, and fact. If you want to watch more such documentary stories, tap on the photos that will appear above the screen. And what do you think? Is it possible that such stories are based on real events, or are they just modern legends that become more and more incredible over time? Write your opinion in the comments. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you found the video interesting, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell so you don't miss the next documentary stories about the most mysterious and unexplained cases in the world.